So, a second universal support has just hit version 4. Hey guys, Big P here. So hope you guys are having a good Himiko as well as Fate patch so far. While version 4.5 is gonna be upon us very soon with a couple of interesting choices between another Elation DPS that could work with the follow-up attack Ashveil team, as well as a second universal support Summer Robin that seems to work with Remembrance and Himiko, potentially even more team comps. There will also be 2 different reruns featuring Hyacine as well as Ashveil for some interesting cost upgrades. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into the best pudding plan for this summer. So just as a quick summary, if you guys want to check out what you guys missed in version 4.5, you can kindly check out this video right here. So we're only going to be focusing this video for the discussions of the version 4.5 units, as well as the reruns to see if you should be pulling for them. I would say, generally speaking, 4.5 is looking like a little bit more of a chill patch, like us going to a summer OVA episode in an anime, though there might be some interesting developments that could set up IPC's future, as well as the potential for the Zenless Zone Zero collaboration in the winter of 2026. For version 4.5, the banners will be lasting 5 weeks instead of the usual 6, with the banners going for 2.5 weeks each for both units instead of a 3-week split schedule. So Wave Aventurine is actually going to be starting on the 12th of September, which is a Saturday instead of the usual Wednesday updates. Now this also means that Wave Aventurine's early access as well as guides will be out slightly earlier than usual, so just something to take note of. So if they're out of the way, we are just going to be jumping into Robin Summeretto, which I'm just going to be calling Sobin for the rest of my life. Early access is going to be this Wednesday to take a deep dive into her kit, so detailed guide will be coming very soon. As a general glance, Sobin is going to be an action advancer with energy regeneration, defense down, Mimo sprites damage, as well as her own vice mechanic that can determine the strength of her buffs. So from what we've seen for the live stream, this is a very limited view of a Remembrance team comp as well as Nimiko for team building, but it will be much more flexible than that, which I feel is going to be a lot more practical. So for the first time ever, we are going to be saying that for Sobin's pool value, it really will be depending on your personal account. So the overall value will be based on 2 major things, first of which being what DPS you want to use Sobin with, and secondly, how many costs does your support roster currently have. As such, I would say this is the first ever unit I'm rating a full "it depends" out of 10, because Sobin is a character that's extremely flexible, especially with 3 team endgame content, multiple generally support we have for a couple of years, on top of dedicated teams like the Big 3, Break Slop, Mimo Slop, as well as Elation, all having their unique team members that doesn't really want a lot of universal supports. For Remembrance specifically, the livestream showcased the option of either replacing Cyrene or Casterus. Now the main takeaway is going to be Hyacine and Aventurine are both users who benefit from energy regeneration as well as action advance, which makes for more heals as well as more EV damage. So for Sobin herself and whether she should be pulling for Mimo sprites, it will depend on the number of investments between your Mimo units to see if she's going to be worthy of an upgrade. The one common concern which might be your buff coverage, so it will be depending on Sobin's ultimate frequency. Stay tuned in the future as this will be one of the first things I'll be testing in the early access. The other team for the live stream was going to be done with Nimiko replacing either Sunday or Sparkle, keeping well as a decimation proc generator as well as Ho-Ho for energy regeneration instead of DHPT running Verdict. Since Nimiko gains full benefits to Sobin very similar to Sunday's buffs, I will believe this will be a considerable upgrade at even just 1 cost. Now, the other teams that have actually not been shown by the live stream, which will mainly include Wave Aventurine with Ashveil for follow-up attack spam on a sustainless angle, or E2 Final, which will always benefit from a hypercarry support like Sobin. Now, I am particularly interested in the interaction between Cyrene, Finon, Saridra, and Sobin, as Finon remains permanent in this state, while Sobin helps Cyrene generate her Mimo sprite stacks. So if they're out of the way, the elephant in the room is I personally don't really like the idea of having too many generated supporters, because the opportunity cost is going to be you allocating a more efficient distribution of items or units for a team that you want to play. I feel the purpose of a universal support is to act as a placeholder for teams who don't have a dedicated support just yet, or an after-sale unit until they eventually get released. Then you can take those while pushing the universal support into another team, and the process repeats itself over and over again. So for example, taking my journey of a E1 Tribute and why E1 Tribute had an insane value for my personal free-to-play account, I started with a E0 S0 Herta and instantly jumped straight into an E1 S0 Tribute where she gave ample usage. Then I eventually pivoted Tribute into a Casterus before Avenite, Hyacine, and Cyrene, and once those team members complete my Remembrance flagship, E1 Tribute always had a way to find play in my Team 2 and now Team 3 between Herta, Nexa, Archer, and now Himiko Nova. Her value as a unit for Tribby might not always be best in slot, but you don't always need a best in slot team at all times, especially not as a free-to-play who needs to be more cost efficient instead of constantly chasing the best teams. So using this principle on Sobin, I'm sure she'll definitely find play in almost every single team in HSR, just like Tribby back then, some example being Remembrance, Finon, Ashveil, Waveflair himself, Nimiko, and potentially even Elation for the short term. Now, the main teams that might not consistently use her are going to be break teams, DOT, and I would say Elation in the long term. While Sobin might be able to find play in most teams for now, not every single team needs to get Sobin as an upgrade depending on how many cores the current support roster has, which brings me to my next point. Sobin's value as a whole is also affected by your current support cost. Think of the replaceability of an E0 versus an E2 Spargo or an E0 versus E2 Cyrene. The more costs you have on your existing supports, the less incentive I would find to get a 1 or 2 cost upgrade for Sobin. And not only will the older supports be unemployed, effectively wasting the cost, but you also need to commit even more pools for an upgrade that's going to be Sobin for a teammate that you may or may not even need in the long term. So with all that being established, I'll be looking forward to see how her team comps and actual performance are going to be for all the different variations that we're going to be seeing for a support unit, which is always going to be changing up the Honkai style meta by a significant degree. Now, moving on to Wave Aventurine, he's going to be an Elation DPS that works with either follow-up attack hits from Ashveil with DHPT for the full man team. If he's going to be paired with another Elation unit, like for example Yao Guang as well as EMC, potentially even maybe Pearl, then this will be just another Elation main DPS. Otherwise, you'll pretty much want teammates to hit as frequently as possible for more bangers and punchline generation as a self-sufficient Elation DPS that can also double as a follow-up attack DPS. So if you're going to be thinking of pulling for Wave Aventurine for Ashblade players, this is going to be a rough 8 out of 10. So Wave Aventurine is going to be looking like a classic main DPS with 2 main team building options between follow-up attack as well as Elation. For the CM perspective, they didn't really pay too much attention for Wave Aventurine because Sobin looks to be the main focus on what she can bring to a table for a lot of different teams. And also, there's a lack of confidence for a second half main DPS, so that's pretty much it. That being said, for Ashveil players who have been waiting for a main DPS, you can finally consider getting Bro because he's definitely going to be a version 4 caliber of a follow-up attack main DPS with the next best thing from Facial all the way back in version 2 without a Noah Flare. And yes, I would say Facial, objectively speaking, at E2 is still going to be performing decently for all endgame content. So if you want to try your hands at a follow-up attack DPS, then Wave Aventurine is going to be the way to go. Now for Elation mains, I personally think for those who already have either Silverwolf or Evanesia, you don't really need to concern about him that much and save your pools for both Pearl as well as potentially Nihilux in the future. If you're undecided on which Elation main DPS you prefer, then at an E0 baseline, he definitely has the potential to match quite well with a E0 Silverwolf as well as E0 Evanesia. At this point, I like to think of the whole Firefly versus Reba versus Blue Hill situation, and we can all see what happened to that particular team comp going forward in the future. So with those 2 units being out of the way, let's just jump straight into the rerun value. First half featuring Hyacine and second half featuring Ashveil. Now again, for reruns, I'll look at them at the perspective of cost maxing. So for Hyacine herself, for casters mains, E1 Hyacine has a very good value alongside important Eidolons, namely E1 Aventurine as well as E2 Casters. You can take a look from this over here. Literally every single Casters 0 cycle for this Anomaly Arbitration King can only be done with E2 Casters as well as E1 Hyacine, with a mix between Avenite, Cyrene, Tribby as well as Blade. Now for Aventurine mains, Hyacine is not technically a must for sustainless 0 cycles, but it still makes the life a lot more comfortable for anyone else thinking of using Hyacine. And for those who are looking to get Sobin alongside Aventurine, Hyacine is still gonna be definitely the best sustain bar none, with the benefit of running sustainless much more frequently compared to casters who's gonna be tied to a sustain. Now, with regards to Hyacine's signature light cone, S1 is gonna be having decent value, but it's not gonna be as important as E1 in terms of performance, namely with the mini Cyrene light cone as a great replacement instead. Now, for all other teams as of this current moment, they tend to go for DHPT most of the time, so unless you play Mimo Sprite units and you want to be an elitist, going for the 0 cycles, getting the E1 upgrade, you don't really need to get Hyacine as of this current moment. Now, jumping into Ashveil, this is almost entirely viable as a unit at E0 as 0, though it will definitely depend on how many cores your M-Blade has, the key breakpoint being the E2 M-Blade. And also, as of right now, M-Blade and Ashveil is pretty much gonna be one of, if not the most synergistic duo in this current moment. So if you're thinking going for Ashveil, I will highly recommend to see if your box even has M-Blade in the first place. If you do not have Morton's Blade, then Ashveil's performance is definitely gonna be suffering by quite a bit. Between S1 and E1, they're both really good, but S1 is technically cheaper, especially if you're not going to be concerning yourself with the cost maxing. You can definitely run yourself the S5D Herda while going for the E1 Ashveil for higher damage output. Another interesting thing is that Ashveil himself is also one of the top 5 lowest cost teams in this Anomaly Arbitration King, allowing even for Aircron to be wheelchair all the way to a 5 cost 0 cycle running an E2 Emblade. Now, generally speaking, Emblade's vertical upgrades are stronger than Ashveil, so a single copy of Ashveil will suffice if you're thinking of another teammate. So you also want to consider between Sobin as well as Waveflair's potential placement, as you could both see play with Ashveil as well as Modern's Blade, so adjust your cost accordingly. I would say generally speaking, as of right now, if you're thinking about a rerun option, you always want to look into what other supports as well as DPS you actually have available, and to see if they're going to be having more of a priority compared to getting new units. Of course, if you're not going to be thinking about 0 cycles or going for the low cost clears, just generally clearing at a casual 3-star placement, definitely go for whichever you're going to be preferring to play, especially if you really do like their playstyles, then consider getting their upgrades in the future. So in summary, Sobin is going to be a generalist support with a lot of value, but it will definitely depend on your team. Waveflair is going to be for Ashveil unless you want to play another Elation main DPS, then Hyacine is going to be for Mimo sprites, and Ashveil is going to be for your Emblade plus full attacking teams. I would say version 4.5, the start of this entire patch is definitely going to be looking towards Sobin, because every single time a new support is going to be coming, it will be changing a lot of how your team building is going to be for all of the different DPSs, and we'll see if she's going to be replacing either Sparkle, Sunday, Cyrene, and all of these respective supports might be seeing a lot of competition. So let me know what you guys think in the thoughts and comments below on the version 4.5 update between Sobin as well as Aventurine. Well, today is going to be Burp. Join you on Discord. Use code PORTEM of GamersUps. All the best of Pools. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.